James Carter, a seemingly ordinary father, and Marcus Riley, a brave parade-goer, never imagined that one summer afternoon in Liverpool would change their lives forever. On a day meant for celebration, chaos erupted when a hidden attacker struck, leaving the city in shock and fear. This is the story of the Liverpool parade attack, the hunt for the man behind it, and the shocking events that led to a 21-and-a-half-year sentence. Liverpool was alive with an energy that seemed to pulse through every street and alley. It was the city's annual summer parade, a celebration that had drawn locals and tourists alike for decades. People of all ages had gathered, some clutching balloons or waving flags, others simply standing along the curbs to enjoy the spectacle. The aroma of fresh popcorn and roasted nuts filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of the nearby river. Children ran in circles, their laughter carrying over the rhythmic beat of marching bands and the hum of float engines. Vendors called out cheerfully, offering souvenirs and snacks, while families snapped photographs to capture the day's excitement. The floats were elaborate, painted in bright colors and adorned with decorations that sparkled under the summer sun. Performers waved and danced, tossing candy into the crowd as the crowd cheered. The atmosphere was festive and carefree, with an underlying sense of unity and pride that came from years of tradition. Even those who had never attended before felt caught up in the joy, swept along by the parade's energy, and the sight of familiar streets transformed into a stage of celebration. The city itself seemed to join in the festivity. Buildings were draped in banners, and shop owners leaned out of windows to wave at the crowds below. Street performers, jugglers, and musicians added to the carnival-like ambience, blending seamlessly into the colorful procession. Laughter and music seemed to echo off the brick walls of Liverpool's historic buildings, creating a sense of timelessness, as if the city had paused its daily routines just to celebrate this single perfect afternoon. But amid the cheer, there were small, almost imperceptible signs that something was off. A few individuals lingered at the edges of the crowd, watching more than participating. A shadowy figure paused near a side street, seemingly observing the parade with unusual intensity. Most people didn't notice. They were too engrossed in the spectacle, too caught up in the excitement and music to suspect that danger might be lurking nearby. The warmth of the sun, the familiar faces, and the carefree chatter all created a sense of false security. For most, it was just another beautiful summer day, one that would be remembered fondly in photographs and stories. Children waved to performers, parents held hands with their loved ones, and the city seemed suspended in a bubble of joy. Everyone believed the parade would continue as it always had, safe, celebratory, and unremarkable in its familiarity. No one could have imagined that beneath the surface of this joyous occasion, a threat was quietly moving closer, waiting for the perfect moment to shatter the illusion of safety. The tension, invisible yet real, was building without anyone realizing it, preparing to transform what began as a day of celebration into a day that Liverpool would never forget. The parade moved slowly through the streets, the music and laughter filling the air like a comforting blanket. Families leaned forward on the curbs, eager to catch a glimpse of the next float or performer. Children clutched their parents' hands tightly, pointing excitedly at colorful dancers twirling in time with the drums. The atmosphere was electric, a perfect celebration of summer in Liverpool. Yet, amid the rhythm of the festivities, a single figure stood out. The man was unremarkable at first glance, blending into the crowd with a casual gait and neutral expression. But there was something in his eyes that suggested calculation, a cold focus that contrasted sharply with the joy around him. He lingered at the edge of the crowd, moving in small, deliberate steps, keeping pace with the parade, but never drawing attention. His hands remained hidden, and he avoided direct interaction with anyone. Most people were too busy waving at performers or chatting with neighbors to notice, but a quiet unease seemed to radiate from his presence, unnoticed yet undeniable. Then, without warning, the attack began. The man struck with precision, moving quickly through the crowd as panic erupted. Screams pierced the festive sounds of drums and cheering as people scrambled in every direction. Parents grabbed their children, trying to shield them, while others tripped over the pavement in fear. The joyous parade transformed instantly into a scene of chaos. Floats were forced to halt as attendees scattered, leaving decorations swinging dangerously and performers frozen in shock. The attacker targeted anyone who came near, moving with a chilling purpose. In the confusion, no one could understand what had sparked the violence. Bystanders were pushed aside, some injured in the stampede. Emergency services received calls almost immediately, and within moments, the streets were flooded with flashing lights and sirens. Ambulances navigated through the panicked crowd while officers tried to establish control, shouting instructions that were drowned out by the cries and shouts of terrified attendees. Even in the midst of chaos, some individuals acted with remarkable courage. Strangers helped one another, forming human shields around children and the elderly. People guided the injured to safer areas, holding them until paramedics arrived. Yet the attacker's speed and unpredictability made him almost impossible to anticipate. He moved like a shadow through the crowd, vanishing for a moment and reappearing in another direction, keeping authorities on high alert. It was only after several tense minutes that the man was finally cornered by police officers at a side street. The crowd watched, frozen in disbelief, as the attacker was restrained and taken into custody. His calm demeanor in the midst of the chaos was unsettling, leaving witnesses shaken and questioning how one person could wreak so much havoc so quickly. The parade, once a symbol of joy and unity, had become a vivid reminder of vulnerability. Liverpool, a city known for its resilience and pride, now faced the stark reality that violence could erupt anywhere, even in the most seemingly innocent of celebrations. The news of the parade attack spread through Liverpool like wildfire, leaving the city in shock. Word traveled faster than any official announcement, with witnesses recounting the chaos in vivid detail. Social media feeds were flooded with images of overturned stalls, scattered decorations, and panicked families, accompanied by frantic messages asking if loved ones were safe. The sheer scale of the attack was difficult to comprehend, and for many, it felt unreal, like a nightmare that had invaded the heart of a city known for its vibrant spirit and close-knit communities. Hospitals became overwhelmed almost immediately. Emergency rooms were inundated with people suffering from minor injuries, shock, and in some cases, severe trauma. Doctors and nurses worked tirelessly, triaging patients and providing care with little time to rest. Volunteers from nearby areas rushed to help, offering supplies, comfort, and support to victims and their families. Even those who had not attended the parade felt the ripple effect, drawn into a citywide effort to aid the injured and provide reassurance to the fearful. Families who had been separated during the attack frantically searched for one another. Parents called friends and relatives, tracking their children's whereabouts, while young people tried to locate elderly family members caught in the panic. For some, the reunion came quickly, bringing relief. For others, it took hours. The sense of uncertainty amplified the trauma, leaving a lingering fear that something worse might have happened. Every corner of Liverpool felt the impact. Schools canceled classes, offices closed early, and shops the morning after the attack. Liverpool was a city under investigation. Police barricades lined the streets, cordoning off areas where the chaos had unfolded. Officers moved methodically through the parade route, combing for evidence, photographing every detail, and taking statements from witnesses still shaken by the events. It quickly became clear that the attack had been planned rather than spontaneous. Small details previously unnoticed now painted a picture of premeditation: a discarded backpack, footprints leading to hidden corridors, and traces of weapons carefully concealed until the moment of the assault. Detectives worked tirelessly, piecing together the attacker's movements. CCTV footage from nearby shops and traffic cameras was scrutinized frame by frame. Every angle was analyzed to track his path, his method, and most importantly, his intentions. Witness accounts added color to the cold. Digital evidence, a fleeting glimpse of a man lingering too long near the float, the subtle tension noticed by only a few observers, and the precise timing that allowed him to strike before emergency personnel could respond. Each new piece of information deepened the sense that the attack had been carefully orchestrated, sending a chilling message that this was not an act of random violence. Digital forensics soon became a central focus. Officers examined the suspect's social media activity, searching for posts, messages, and online behavior that might explain the motive. Patterns began to emerge: disturbing comments, cryptic warnings, and research into public events that suggested an obsession with creating chaos in crowded spaces. The investigators realized that the attacker had studied the parade for months, analyzing crowd movements, potential escape routes, and the timing of floats. Every detail had been calculated to maximize confusion and fear, turning a celebration into a nightmare. As the investigation deepened, law enforcement discovered connections that surprised even seasoned detectives. The man had lived a seemingly ordinary life, blending into neighborhoods, holding a job, and appearing unremarkable to those around him. Yet behind closed doors, he had meticulously documented violent fantasies and strategies in journals and digital files. It was a dual existence, outwardly normal, inwardly consumed by a desire to instill terror. The contrast between his public persona and private obsessions shocked the city and raised questions about the warning signs that had gone unnoticed. Meanwhile, the community watched with a mixture of fear and fascination. Every new revelation seemed to uncover more layers of premeditation, amplifying the sense that Liverpool had narrowly escaped an even greater tragedy. News outlets covered the unfolding investigation around the clock, broadcasting interviews with experts in criminal behavior, law enforcement officials, and community leaders. The collective anxiety was palpable, as residents wondered how such a carefully concealed plan could exist in plain sight. By the end of the week, the investigation had produced a detailed profile of the attacker and his methods. Authorities emphasized the meticulous nature of the planning, the hidden signs of intent, and the importance of vigilance. The city was no longer just a backdrop for celebration. It had become a character in the unfolding drama, scarred by the events, yet determined to understand and prevent future attacks. Liverpool was learning, slowly and painfully, that danger could be disguised behind ordinary faces, and that the line between peace and chaos could be far thinner than anyone had imagined. The man arrested for the parade attack was immediately identified by police, though the details of his life shocked the city. At 34 years old, he appeared outwardly ordinary, blending into Liverpool's neighborhoods and routines without drawing suspicion. To his co-workers, neighbors, and even distant acquaintances, he seemed like a quiet, unremarkable figure, someone who might attend community events and return home without incident. But as investigators dug deeper, the contrast between his public persona and private life became increasingly disturbing. Authorities discovered a small, hidden stash of weapons in his apartment, carefully concealed behind false panels and under loose floorboards. Knives, blunt instruments, and other tools were meticulously organized, each labeled and maintained as if part of a chilling collection. Forensic experts noted that these items were not intended for casual use. They were prepared for precise action, stored in a way that suggested careful planning over months or even years. The evidence painted a portrait of a man who had considered every detail of a violent encounter, rehearsing in his mind what he would do and when. Even more unsettling were the journals and digital files found on his personal devices. Handwritten notes detailed violent fantasies, specific targets, and strategies for creating maximum fear. Some passages described scenarios eerily similar to what had occurred at the parade, raising questions about how long he had been planning the attack and whether he had observed other public events to refine his methods. Investigators also found research on crowd behavior, emergency response patterns, and escape routes, indicating a level of preparation that went far beyond impulsive violence. Psychologists and criminal experts who examined the materials were struck by the dichotomy between his ordinary daily life and his hidden obsessions. Friends and coworkers expressed disbelief that someone so normal could harbor such dangerous thoughts. To the authorities, it became clear that this duality was a key factor in allowing him to execute the attack without raising suspicion beforehand. He had carefully constructed a life that appeared stable while concealing a deeply disturbed mind capable of extreme violence. Interviews with neighbors revealed small, seemingly insignificant behaviors that, in hindsight, hinted at his inner turmoil. He would often walk alone at night, observing crowded streets and public gatherings. Occasionally, people noticed him lingering near events or photographing locations without clear reason. These moments had gone largely unnoticed or dismissed, yet they were now recognized as early signs of an impending threat. The discovery of his meticulous planning sent shockwaves through Liverpool. Residents struggled to reconcile the idea that someone living among them could harbor such dangerous intentions without detection. The case also raised broader concerns about safety in public spaces and the difficulty of identifying hidden threats. Police emphasized the importance of vigilance while praising the rapid response that prevented further tragedy. As the investigation continued, the man's carefully hidden life became a focus for both law enforcement and the media. Every revelation deepened the sense of disbelief, illustrating how premeditation and secrecy had enabled one individual to disrupt an entire city's sense of safety. Liverpool had survived the immediate attack, but the knowledge of how close the community had come to greater harm lingered, leaving an unsettling awareness that danger can sometimes be invisible, hiding behind the most ordinary of faces. The trial of the Liverpool parade attacker became one of the most closely followed cases in recent British history. From the moment proceedings began, the courtroom was filled with tension, the kind that made every movement, every expression, seem amplified. The man, sitting calmly at the defendant's table, appeared almost detached from the gravity of the accusations. Around him, families of the victims, journalists, and legal professionals waited, each aware that what unfolded in those walls would define the city's understanding of the tragedy. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture of premeditation. They described how the attack had been carefully planned over months, from the meticulous selection of the parade to the detailed study of crowd movements and emergency response patterns. They presented photographs of the weapon stash, screenshots of disturbing social media posts, and excerpts from his journals. Each piece of evidence added another layer to the narrative, demonstrating that the violence was not an impulsive outburst, but a calculated act meant to terrorize as many people as possible. The defense, meanwhile, argued that the man's mental state needed to be considered. They brought forward psychologists who spoke of possible disorders and the influence of deep-seated trauma, suggesting that while the attack was horrifying, it stemmed from a mind disconnected from reality. These testimonies, however, did little to lessen the horror of the crimes in the eyes of the public or the jury. The evidence of planning, the injuries sustained by victims, and the chaos created on what should have been a peaceful day all pointed to a deliberate act of violence. Victims' statements added a human dimension to the proceedings. One by one, people recounted the terror they had felt as the attack unfolded. Some described the instinctive panic of shielding loved ones, while others recounted the lasting physical injuries and psychological scars they carried. Parents spoke of the fear of losing their children, and elderly attendees recalled the confusion and helplessness as they tried to escape. Each story reinforced the enormity of the attack's impact, turning abstract details into raw, emotional testimony that echoed throughout the courtroom. The media coverage brought the trial into homes across the United Kingdom. News outlets, including Sky News, broadcast the proceedings, highlighting the evidence, courtroom dynamics, and reactions of those affected. Public interest was intense. Discussions about public safety, mental health, and the nature of premeditated violence dominated headlines and social media feeds. The trial was more than a legal proceeding. It had become a lens through which the nation examined its own vulnerabilities. As the weeks progressed, the tension in the courtroom remained unbroken. Every piece of evidence introduced, every witness called, added to the suspense. The jurors were faced with not only the facts of the case, but the moral weight of determining justice for actions that had terrorized a city. Outside, Liverpool itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the outcome that would provide some measure of closure, even as the wounds from that day remained fresh and raw. By the time closing arguments were presented, it was clear to everyone involved that the case would leave a lasting mark on the city. The trial had exposed the depth of planning behind the attack, the vulnerability of public gatherings, and the resilience of those who had survived. It had also set the stage for a sentence that would make a definitive statement about the consequences of deliberate violence in the heart of Liverpool. After weeks of testimony, evidence presentation, and careful deliberation, the moment of sentencing arrived. The courtroom was packed, charged with tension that seemed almost tangible. Families of the victims, many still recovering from the physical and emotional scars of the attack, sat quietly, their eyes fixed on the defendant as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. The man remained composed, his expression unreadable, as if the enormity of the moment held no sway over him. Outside, crowds had gathered near the courthouse, media vans lining the streets, all waiting for the news that would finally bring a sense of closure to a city still reeling from shock. The judge began by recounting the events of the parade attack in precise, somber detail. Every act of violence, every moment of fear and confusion, was described methodically, leaving no doubt about the deliberate nature of the crime. The judge emphasized the calculated planning behind the assault, the targeting of innocent families, and the lasting physical and psychological impact on the victims. Each word carried weight, reflecting the severity of the crime and the breach of trust it represented within the community. Families watched silently as the courtroom absorbed the gravity of the statement. Some clutched photographs of loved ones, others held hands tightly, bracing themselves for the words that would finally define justice. Survivors of the attack, who had recounted their experiences earlier in the trial, now felt a mix of relief and lingering fear as the courtroom collectively absorbed the judge's message. The city outside the courthouse mirrored this tension, with residents following live updates, awaiting the official pronouncement that would bring a sense of finality to a traumatic chapter in Liverpool as history. Then came the sentence. The judge pronounced a term of 21.5 years in prison, reflecting both the deliberate planning and the devastating consequences of the attack. The words hung in the air, heavy and definitive. In that instant, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath, the weight of the punishment settling over everyone present. The sentence was carefully calibrated to reflect the seriousness of the crime, the calculated premeditation, and the need to send a clear message about the consequences of such acts of violence. Reactions were immediate. Families of victims allowed themselves a quiet sense of relief, though the emotional wounds remained. The public, following through news coverage and social media, debated the sufficiency of the sentence, but few could deny the clarity with which justice had been articulated. Police and prosecutors expressed satisfaction that the legal system had addressed the gravity of the crime effectively, while community leaders emphasized that the sentence reinforced the city's commitment to safety, vigilance, and resilience. Even after the verdict, Liverpool felt the lingering impact of the attack. The city had witnessed violence erupt in a moment that should have been purely celebratory, and the sentencing marked both an end and a beginning, a recognition of the suffering endured and a step toward rebuilding trust and security. The 21.5 years served as a stark reminder that deliberate violence carries consequences, but also that a city, scarred yet steadfast, could begin to reclaim its sense of normalcy, one measured step at a time. In the weeks following the sentencing, Liverpool began the slow, deliberate process of healing. The streets that had once echoed with panic now carried a cautious, tentative calm. Families of the victims worked to rebuild their routines, balancing grief with the practical demands of daily life. Schools reopened fully, offices resumed normal operations, and the city's iconic markets and streets once again thrummed with activity. Yet beneath the surface, a sense of vigilance lingered. The attack had left an indelible mark, a reminder that danger could emerge where it was least expected. Memorials sprang up across the city, small but poignant tributes to those affected by the attack. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes lined street corners near the parade route. Community members gathered to honor the resilience of survivors and the memory of those whose lives had been changed forever. These gatherings became both acts of remembrance and statements of unity, demonstrating that the city would not be defined by fear. Liverpool's residents, bound together by shared trauma, found strength in collective mourning and in the quiet determination to move forward. City officials implemented new safety measures for public events, ensuring that future celebrations would be better protected. Security checkpoints, surveillance systems, and emergency response plans were updated, reflecting lessons learned from the parade attack. Organizers of public gatherings collaborated closely with law enforcement, creating strategies that balanced festivity with vigilance. While the measures could not erase the memory of what had happened, they offered reassurance to a community determined to reclaim its sense of normalcy. The media continued to cover the aftermath extensively. News outlets revisited the attack, highlighting not only the events themselves, but the resilience displayed by the city in response. Survivors shared stories of courage, recounting how strangers had stepped in to help, how emergency services had acted swiftly, and how ordinary citizens had become protectors in moments of chaos. These accounts emphasized that Liverpool was not a city defeated by violence, but one capable of rising stronger and more united. Psychologists and counselors worked with victims and families to address the lingering trauma. Many struggled with anxiety, fear of crowded places, and flashbacks of the attack. Mental health professionals provided support groups, therapy sessions, and educational programs, helping individuals process the events while learning coping mechanisms for the future. Over time, small victories, such as returning to public events or walking confidently along the parade route, became symbols of personal and communal recovery. Liverpool also reflected on the broader implications of the attack. Community leaders, law enforcement, and civic organizations engaged in conversations about prevention, mental health awareness, and public safety. The tragedy had prompted a reevaluation of how ordinary citizens, authorities, and institutions could work together to prevent similar incidents. The lessons were clear. Vigilance, preparedness, and community cohesion were essential in a world where threats could emerge suddenly and unpredictably. By the time the anniversary of the parade arrived, Liverpool had transformed its grief into a quiet strength. The city commemorated the day with remembrance ceremonies, but also with celebration, honoring resilience alongside memory. The parade returned, this time with heightened awareness and precautions, yet still infused with joy. The attack would never be forgotten, but the city had demonstrated that even after darkness, a community could emerge stronger, wiser, and determined to reclaim its streets and spirit.